On today's show, television meets microcomputers in the 1980s.
Interpreters meet languages, and code meets tape.
Oh, and Luigi plays Frak! Exclamation mark. Hello and welcome to 8-Bit Crisis. My name's Link.
And I'm Luigi, and we're here to help you explore the era of 8-bit computing, when Acorn, Amstrad, Commodore and Sinclair ruled the digital waves.
But before we do that, Luigi, have you been up to anything interesting at the moment?
I've played a bit of Jetpack. I have reached level 2 on Boulder Dash.
Level 3?
Oh yeah, level 3.
Got to level 3, yeah.
I forgot I beat level 2.
Absolutely. And we have some other news to share. We always knew when we started this channel that we were going to have some equipment going rogue at some point, going faulty. And I'm very sorry to say that the C64 no longer has a keyboard output. Every time we press a button on the computer, it doesn't make anything appear on the screen. The joystick's working.
Yeah, so from now on, whenever we're doing stuff on the Commodore, we're going to be using the joysticks and the controllers because we're not physically able to use the keyboard at the moment.
Have you not seen what arrived in the post today?
No, I haven't.
Oh, okay, right. Well, let's fill people in. So the Commodore 64, the C64, as you know, is a modern day emulator made by Retro Games Limited. And I always knew I was going to have to repair something, but I thought it would be that thing over there, the 40-year-old Sinclair Spectrum Plus 2. So it turns out it's 1-0 to the 1980s. However, luckily, just recently, Amazon have managed to get some new stock of the C64. So I've gone and bought another one, which will enable me to take them both apart and work out which bit is faulty. And hopefully we can repair it, and I'll try and film that, and that'll be quite good. But yeah, we've had a casualty already. So there we go. Everyone's up to date. Let's move into Let's Cheer for the Gear, and we're going to talk about the BBC Micro. I may not have played on it very much as a child, but I do have memories of the BBC Micro. Is that a computer you've heard about before?
Isn't it the one that was used by the BBC, and it was made by, was it Acorn?
Yep, Acorn.
And this is mainly from you and Mum telling me about it from almost schools. Wasn't it used as almost an educational computer?
That's right, yep.
But Mum not long ago was watching a playthrough, because we were talking about it in the following up to this video. Mum was watching a game through of Granny's Garden, because she really used to like that game.
Yeah, we sparked a memory, didn't we?
Yeah.
And Mum ended up on YouTube watching a video of Granny's Garden. Good, so you actually know quite a lot already. It all started in 1978 when a guy called Chris Curry was working for a company called Cambridge Processing Units Limited, like CPU, I suppose, which was connected with Clive Sinclair of the Sinclair Spectrum. And Chris Curry wanted to develop a computer called the MK14, and Clive Sinclair didn't want to pursue this idea. So Chris Curry ended up resigning, and he joined up with a guy called Herman Hauser, and they started developing computers. So there was a couple of smaller, less commercially successful projects, and then they hit upon something called the Acorn Atom. And the Acorn Atom competed with the Sinclair ZX80 and ZX81. Yeah, so those really early computers before the ones that we're actually looking at during this season. I think they sold about 10,000 units, went quite well. And then the BBC came along and they said, we want to let everybody around the country know about these new microcomputers, and we want to show them how they work, a bit like we're trying to do now on YouTube. And they were looking for a manufacturer who could make a computer that was relevant to that project and it would feature in a television program. And there's a bit of a long story around all of this, but the upshot of it is after a failed agreement with another company, Acorn won the rights to do this project and create a computer. And that's how the BBC Micro was born. Now, I think the BBC Micro had two disadvantages to it, but it had one big advantage that allowed it to still do quite well in the microcomputer space. Yeah. So the disadvantages to it were, I think, that it was underpowered in terms of RAM. So it was initially it was released in 1981 with 16 kilobytes of RAM, and there was also a 32 kilobyte version as well, and they were called the AC series BBC Micros. And the issue with that is that the ZX Spectrum and the Commodore 64 were just around the corner. Like a year later, all of that would be up and running, and it would make the RAM look small on the BBC Micro. And I suspect that led in part to the second detriment that they had, which was there wasn't a lot of software support for it. So there's a few quite good games on it. One of them we're going to look at later, actually, but it didn't have a big library of games like the other computers.
Yeah.
So it had a couple of problems with it, but I think that was offset by the fact that it had the BBC backing and it was appearing on television and all of that kind of thing, and it went into all the schools, so it sold quite a few units in the end. So later on in 1985, they solved the RAM problem. They went up to 64 kilobytes, and then almost immediately after, a few months after, they had a 128 kilobyte level. But again, the problem at that point, Sinclair had already lost interest in the computer business. That was being sold off to Amstrad. Jack Tramiel had left Commodore. Do you remember where he went?
Didn't he go to... Did he go to Acorn or Amstrad?
No, it's one of the A's, Atari. He went to Atari and set up the ST. And frankly, the 8-bit era was starting to draw to a close, so I think they were just a little bit behind the curve in power.
Yeah, was this just before like the Super Nintendo and Nintendo?
No, it was
and the Mega Drive.
Yeah, those computers were still a few years off. I think the Mega Drive was 88, 89, correct me if I'm wrong. But your Master System and your NES was out at the time. But if you think about it, Jack Tramiel was about to go to Atari and then do the ST, which competed with the Amigas, and they were then moving into the 16-bit era. So I think they had a bit of a timing issue. They also had a limited colour palette. There was only 8 colours, and the other computers tended to have 16. And they had a sound chip by Texas Instruments, which is a bit different to the
SID chip,
the SID chip and the AY chips, as they became called in the later Sinclairs and the Amstrads as well. So that's a little bit about the history. I can remember playing on Granny's Garden. I'm pretty sure a game called Pob was on the BBC Micro as well.
I think you've shown me that when I was really young.
Yeah, you can tell it to do different verbs and it will try and do them, and everyone wants to put Pob can explode or Pob explodes, and then it blows apart, and the teachers in the school used to get really angry when we did that.
Yeah, I think I was really young. We just started doing IT in school.
Yep.
And I was learning about coding, and then you told me about that while we were in the car.
Mm-hmm.
And I was on my... Because when I was really young, I used to have an Amazon Kindle. And on that, I could get Pob. So I told you about it, because it said it was from a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
And you said that I should play it, and I downloaded it, and it...
Yep, I remember. Yeah, so even back then you were delving into 8-bit computing a little bit. So to wrap up the story of Acorn, because we tend to do that with all of them, they went on to create some more computers. So I remember my friend had an Archimedes A3000, which I used to play a biplane fighter game on called Chocks Away, and that was quite good. Lemmings, I think I played on an Archimedes, if memory serves. And yeah, then they also had, I remember, these big 5.5-inch floppy disks as well. 5.25-inch, I think, 5.25-inch floppy disks, which were properly floppy. That's where they got the name floppy from, because they were like a sheet of plastic inside cardboard, and you could bend them. So I've got good memories of that. They also got involved in network computing and quite a few other things, and they actually didn't disappear and become defunct as a company until about 10 years ago. So compared to Commodore and Amstrad, which I think got sold off to Sky and that kind of thing, they actually kept ticking over for a little while. Okay, so that's about the company and the computer. We're just going to have a little look now at languages and interpreters and that kind of thing in our next section of How Does It Work? So this next section, Luigi, is about languages. Okay, just like human beings, we have lots of different languages. Computers also have lots of different languages. Can you remember what the name of the languages that we've been using on the Commodore and the Spectrum?
We've been using BASIC.
Yeah, good. So that's a type of language. It's called a high-level language. Do you know what high-level languages are?
No, I don't.
No. So high-level language is a language that makes sense to humans when they read it, but on its own doesn't make a lot of sense to computers. Okay, so when you write in a language, let A equal 2 and print hello world or something like that, you can actually read the code and the human brain can go, well, that makes sense because it's a bit like our language, but it doesn't really mean anything to a computer. So other examples of high-level languages might be Python, which you might have heard of at school.
And C+, is it?
Yeah, C+. There's also Forth, which is an older language that's used. There's actually quite a few of them. Yeah. Now, the other type of language is, of course, low language or machine level coding. Now, true machine level coding would be all in binary.
Yeah.
You'd literally be typing ones and zeros.
1 0.
Yeah, that's right. And you can't type that into a Commodore because when you load up the Commodore, it loads into BASIC, so it's expecting you to put BASIC commands in. But you can either program your computer or use an application that you load into the computer to allow it to accept lower level languages. Now, in order to do a low level language on something like the Commodore, you'd actually use what's called a machine language monitor, which would allow you to put that lower level language in, where you're actually telling it, load this information from this bank in memory into the CPU, or write what's currently in the CPU over to this particular byte in memory. So it becomes really specific and detailed. There's a bit of a sweet spot in between those, which is called assembly language. An assembly language uses a lot of hexadecimal coding, which we've talked about in the past and we'll cover on a future video. But assembly language is used for most of the games that you play and most of the applications that are being designed on those older computers. And examples of assembly language would be things like Zilog assembly, which is how you would code for the Zilog processor that's in the Spectrum, or it might be MOS assembly language for the MOS 6510 chip that's in the Commodore 64. Okay, but to do assembly language, you need to have something called an assembler, and the assembler will take what you've written and convert it into that low-level binary form. So you're closer to the metal, you're being more precise and more accurate in terms of what you're actually doing in the hardware, but it still needs an assembler to turn it into the binary for you. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you've got high-level languages, which are easy for
languages.
humans, proper low-level machine level language, and then in the middle, what's the one in the middle called?
Hexadecimal.
It uses hexadecimal, you key in hexadecimal quite a lot, but it's called
Zilog.
assembly. Zilog assembly, MOS
Yeah.
assembly, all that. Okay. Why is it good to learn assembly? Well, that's quite easy if you've ever tried to play a game that's been programmed in BASIC. Essentially, if you use assembly, your code is much shorter and it's much more efficient. And the reason is it doesn't have to go through an interpreter. So when you code in BASIC, it actually goes into the computer and goes through an interpreter to convert it into binary. And that's quite an inefficient process, which means that you simply can't do as much with the computer in the time that you have available. And therefore games tend to be quite simple, basic, you might say, clunky and slow. Yeah, doesn't mean you can't get good results. If you look online, there's some good projects where they've made some things work really well in BASIC with some tricks that are beyond me. Yeah, but useful to know. And later on, we'll look a little bit more at machine language. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think it's time to play?
Yes.
Okay, I've got a caveman to introduce you to.
Okay. Okay, so today we're going to be playing Frak on the Acorn. We are actually playing on the Beeb M emulator. This game was made by Nick Pelling from Aardvark Software. This game was made in 1984. So let's get into the game.
So you're going to play Trog, the pink caveman, up against his nemesis enemies here. Watch out for daggers flying through the sky, they can get you. You have a timer counting down to get to the end of the level. Balloons will kill you. Big pink monsters will kill you. Well done. Doing running jump. Ooh.
What's this?
How many colours can you count on the screen then?
3.
Are you including black?
Yeah, I am.
Okay. Oh, Frak!
This is good.
So he's called Trog, but he says Frak, which I think is meant to be a pretend swear word.
Oh.
Frak!
Let that first dagger go.
So you've got 4 colours if you include black, and there's only 8.
How is that 4? 1,
Colours.
2, 3.
Yellow, pink, black, blue.
It's
Yeah?
blue.
The background is blue.
Oh, yeah. We got the background existed.
So that means that Trog lives in a planet where his skin and the grass and his enemies are exactly the same colour as him.
Must be a bit confusing.
That's it. So I will warn you, you can die if you fall too far on this. So you do need to be a bit careful.
That goes through the floor.
I think it was
Why does that do?
a little bit low. What do you think of the music?
It's really
sound.
good.
Yeah.
The sound for. I thought you said there was lacking power in the Sid chip.
No, not really. I think it's a nice sound on this. I don't think it's quite as capable as a sound chip as say the Sid chip would be. But I quite like the design of this one.
Oop, wrong button.
So do you think it's hard?
Very.
I think you've got further than I got. You're better at this game than me.
No, my fracky friend.
Frak. Do you want another go?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Last one. Then we get on to the scores.
Absolutely. Now Nick Pelling, the designer of this, has kindly agreed to have a chat with us. So he's going to be appearing later on. And he was telling me that he's actually remade this game during COVID to make it closer to his original design concept that he wanted it to be. And if anybody wants to try it, that game is actually available on Steam
For
now.
£5, isn't it?
Yeah, well at the moment it is. I don't know if it's going to stay at that price or not, but at the moment it's about £5 on Steam. So I'd encourage people to support Nick, because I think it's great if people who were doing these games many years ago still have a passion and still want to engage with a fan base and even, you know, remake things and make them even better. I think we all have a duty to pay a few pounds and just support them in those endeavours. So check that out.
Oh, wrong button.
Oh.
Frak.
I'm pretty sure that's meant as an expletive. I think that's like a caveman swear word. Great, okay. Right, so, scoring. So first of all, we'll start with concept. What do you think of the concept?
Concept? It reminds me a lot of Mario.
Okay.
Actually.
Well, it's an early platform game.
Yeah.
So I think it has that in common. Is there anything else that makes you think of Mario other than the fact it's a platform game?
Almost the way that it makes me think of Mario as well is you have to climb stuff and drop down through stuff, and also those keys.
Okay.
And also the pink, I can't even remember what they're called because there's 3 of them. And those pink little monsters remind me almost of like bigger versions of the Goombas.
Okay, so what score do we give it for concept?
Concept, because it's before Mario, I'm going to probably give it a 7.
Good.
Because there was probably a lot of platformers before it, but... Graphics, I'll give... Because of the lack of colours, and it's really colourful, but there aren't many colours, so it's really bright. The graphics are alright, so I'll give it... Let's say 6.
6, okay, very good. Sound?
Sounds the best I've heard in any of these games so far, so 10.
Oh, nice, well done. Well done, Nick. And then we come on to playability, and I remember in the last game, you had some problems where the controls were a little bit unreliable, so how did this compare? And
these controls, perfect, every time I pressed the button, happened exactly.
What about the physics of it? Did it feel natural the way he was moving around?
The only thing I have about the physics, and the only reason I'm marking it down 1 point, is due to when you fall, you don't fall down, you fall across, and when you fall, if you fall onto a platform, you fall through the platform, and that doesn't work. So I'm probably going to give it 8.
An 8, okay, well that's still a good score. I did notice that sometimes you feel like something hasn't quite touched you and you lose a life, or like you say, you looks like you just about make a platform but you fall through, so I get it. Well, I've got my own view on this, but what do you think of fun?
Fun, 10.
10, oh great. I had a lot of fun with this for such a simple game. If I'm honest, if I'd just seen a quick screen grab of it, I probably wouldn't have thought much of it. I would have thought, quite a simple platformer, but there's something about it. There's something about the silliness of a caveman walking around with a yo-yo. On the front cover of the original cassette, he's actually wearing black leather shoes as well. And these crazy monsters that he's trying to battle as well. I just
it's almost like a mix between the Flintstones and Mario.
Yeah. So we got 41 out of 50, which is a very decent score for a game on a computer that didn't get a huge amount of software support. But that's your little introduction to Frak and the BBC Micro. So, Luigi, I'm really glad that you enjoyed Frak as much as I did.
Yeah, it was really fun.
And now we're lucky enough to come face to face with the man who created it all those years ago. We'd like to welcome to the channel Nick Pelling, designer of Frak on the BBC Micro. It's lovely to have you with us.
My pleasure to be here. It's great.
Good. So we'll jump straight into our first question for you, which is one from Luigi.
Okay, Nick, before we start on your eccentric and colourful game, I'd like to ask, why the BBC Micro?
Chose me. When I was younger, about your age, I bought a home computer called the Acorn Atom. Now, the Acorn Atom was one of the very, very first ones to come out. And I'd had a Sinclair programmable calculator, which was like very high tech. And I was able to program it to do like stupid stuff. But then Atom came out and I thought, that's really good. So I started playing Atom games. There weren't that many. So I thought, I'll write some. So I wrote my own Atom games. And I published them in the back of Your Computer, little home computer magazine with little ads at the back. And then one day I was at school and I had this kind of like a funny sensation of something going on. So it was a Friday. I didn't know what was going on. And I was like asking everybody, what's going on today? And everyone said, well, I don't know. I got home, I found that a company called Acorn had been trying to get hold of me all day, and they've like been phoning everybody. I didn't know, but I just kind of it was in the air. And so the next day was a Saturday. I went to Cambridge, and I came home having agreed to write my Arcadians came for them. It's like a Galaxians game, and with a brand new BBC Micro under my arm. So I then took it home and wrote the game over that summer. So yeah, that was so it kind of chose me really, but I didn't mind. It was a good computer to write on.
I am curious about what your inspiration was for this game and what kind of games you were playing or reading or books you were reading at the time to inspire the game.
It's actually quite straightforward. I'd previously written some shooty games like Arcadians, which was a kind of a Galaxians kind of thing, and then I wrote a game called Zalaga, which was basically my own version of Galaga, really, but kind of like cut down a bit, and I had a lot of fun with that. But I kind of done shooter games, and I decided I wanted to do something different. And the different thing I wanted to do was I had a very, very clear thing that I wanted to do a non-violent game. I wanted to be inspired by kind of Japanese arcade games. So I used to have friends who would play them all the time. Mm-hmm. And I was I really liked the look of them. But so the non-violent game with like big people in, big characters. And it kind of grew out of that, really. That was kind of the starting point. And a friend of mine called Ian Boffin, he used to like come up with game designs and stuff, and he did a game design called Caveman Capers, right? And on bits of paper, he was a kid he was about 13, 14, and maybe 15, and I liked there was a good idea in there, but it was a bit too cliched. I thought, no, you need a club. You don't have a club. It's not good enough. It's not tactical enough. And I came up with the idea of using yo-yo. And when I was a kid, like 10, 11, I used to play yo-yo all the time. I used to do tricks and stuff and really loved it. And so it kind of like, you use a yo-yo. Yeah, you can't do that. I just did. And I kind of just like, it kind of grew and grew and grew. And it became a nice sort of technical thing that you could reach further away, but while you were doing it, you were vulnerable. Once you've gone through all the 3 levels once, you come again upside down, which is like, and then everyone went, "Wow!"
Yeah, and so I've read about that. I haven't managed to get there yet. So
right.
I'm looking forward to it, but we will do it, won't we? We'll get there.
When we approached you for an interview, you said you'd got a lot of stories about Frak. So yes. What's one or two of your favourite dinner time stories?
I went to Manchester University, well, Owens as it was then, and I was so late that I got the worst room in all of the university, the worst room. And my room was so bad that I had a room off it that the guy had to go through my room to get to his. It was called a corridor room, which is like a nightmare. So I was in this corridor room, but luckily, the guy who was in the other room, Richard Bolter, I really liked him. He was really great. And while I was doing Frak, I wanted to get the walk really right. And you've got like 4 frames of animation. Okay. And so I got him to walk really slowly and just like hold it, and I sketch it and walk, like try to kind of get everything.
And you wish you had a phone with a screen on it so you could just film one take and then sketch it in your own time, of course. Yeah.
It was a long time before that. So yes,
absolutely.
Had to do it the hard way. Everything had to do the hard way.
Well, you must have another one. There must be another story as good as that.
Oh God, Frak, the name.
Yeah.
Where did the name Frak come from? Obviously, it's a swear word, and I didn't want to have a swear word. But a key part of the game came up right from the start was that it had to be something. He had to say something, and I thought, oh, what could I say? And I was talking to my friend Paul Banks at school, and his mother was an astrologer. And she said to him that all memorable names are like short and percussive in a single syllable. Like Jack, she said, that's a really good name. We do Jack. And I thought, I don't want to call Jack. And I was like thinking, that's a stupid name. What can I call it? And then another friend called Louise Parr Morley, and she'll be surprised by this. She probably doesn't even know this. That when she got annoyed, she would say, "Oh, Frak Frock." Okay, and I kind of like these things were in my head at the same time. I thought, Jack, Frick Frak Frock, put them together, Frak. There you are. So that's how I called it. And that's why he says it. And so basically, if you die like that many times, you want to say something like a swear word. So hang on.
So while playing Frak, I know it's meant to be a puzzle game, but not a puzzle game, a platform game, but it almost seems part puzzle game because of the rules and like almost presents a puzzle for you. Did that evolve naturally, or was that always planned?
Kind of evolved out of the game. I have a certain kind of not quite theory, but certain like mindset with writing computer games that you need to set out really clear rules about how it works, and there needs to be some kind of tension inside the rules. Like saying about yo-yoing, that you can yo-yo quite a long way, but you're vulnerable to balloons and things while you're yo-yoing, and you're stuck. So that was the kind of like the kind of balance like that gave you power but kind of responsibility with it. I don't know if that's right. But the kind of the trade-off thing going on. And then once you kind of start with that, you can write a game on with really simple rules like Tetris or something. But the rules have a kind of logic, they have kind of a mind of their own, and the puzzles sort of come out of it in that form.
What was your favourite 8-bit system?
I think my favourite 8-bit system was the BBC Micro, because it had a thing called BBC Basic, and BBC Basic was the thing that kind of broke out of the whole world of 8-bit computing into a thing where kids had learned at school how to program in the computer room. And there were all the BBCs were lined up, and everyone would write BBC Basic, and loads of the kids would go back in lunch times and try to write games and stuff. But there was a whole generation of people who learnt how to program through the BBC Micro. And that was, the Spectrum and stuff had its own Spectrum Basic and stuff, but actually BBC Basic was really, really well, really smartly put together, and it was really an elegant way of writing. It was nice. It was like kind of you go, okay, this is cool. They did a good job here.
Great. So one final question then, going back to your wonderful game of Frak that we thoroughly enjoyed reviewing.
Very pleased to hear it. Very pleased to hear it.
What is the most unexpected outcome from being the designer of Frak?
How come? People just liked it. People just liked it for years and years and years. I worked in games for 20 years, and then I left the industry when the industry kind of collapsed around 2000, and I went into embedded and software development, and I'd often find myself in rooms with people roughly of my generation or older or whatever, or younger, or whatever, and someone would say, "Oh, you're that Nick Pelling, aren't you? Who did Frak?" And half the people in the room would go, "Oh my god, I love that game." So that was really good fun. That was really nice.
I can imagine. Yeah, that's something I think most of us aspire to be remembered for something. Well, Nick, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Of the couple of interviews that we've done so far, I just think we could keep talking to guys like you for hours, but unfortunately we're all limited on time. So we'd just like to say a massive thank you, wouldn't we, from the channel? Yeah.
Really
Cheers, Luigi. Cheers, Link.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us, and we wish you all the best. Thank you.
You too. Good luck with the show.
Okay, so this section is called So You Want to Create. We're actually going to ask the question, what do you do when you have created something? So if we turn off these computers after we've done some coding, we lose the program that we've coded. Now, if you wanted to save a file now, how would you save it in the modern world?
USB stick if you want a solid version, if you want it just for your computer, the cloud, or maybe a OneDrive, or just the main computer.
Yeah, the hard disk, yeah, okay. Well, if you're at university these days, you can probably remember a time when you used to record things onto a CD-ROM. If you're in the first 10 years of your career, you might be able to remember floppy drives. But if you're as old as me, then you'll remember these things, cassette tapes, okay? And we've used them for our games, of course, but now we're going to have a go at saving a file onto a cassette tape and loading it, okay? So we'll put this into our Sinclair Spectrum that we're using at the moment. I'm actually, before I even start, I'm going to press play because the first bit of the tape is white and it's
blank.
We can't record onto that, so I've just played a bit to get it onto the actual brown tape that we can record onto, and then stopped it. Okay, so on our computer we can see that I've typed a program. It's a really short program called Hello World, and this is what a lot of people do as their very first program when they learn. Line 10 will print Hello World on the page. Line 20 says go back to line 10. So if we run it, we can see that it will just keep continuously typing Hello World. The file is still there, we can still see it. If I turn off this Spectrum now,
you lose it.
we lose
it's
it.
Gone.
And it doesn't matter with that because we could just type it again. But if you had spent an hour writing a long program, you might want to save it. All right. So easy to save. We save in quotation marks. We give it a name. So HW is what we're going to save it as. And then we press enter, and it will give us an instruction, which you're going to follow, Luigi. If you could hold down, record and play at the same time, and then press any key. We see blue and cyan, then it will go very briefly to yellow and blue, then blue and cyan again, and then yellow and blue. Now that that's finished, we can stop the tape. Very good. There is a meaning to those colours. The blue and yellow is where it's actually recording data to the tape. So the first patch of blue and yellow is where it's setting up the file name and a little bit of information about the file. The second blue and yellow is where it's actually recording the data of the two lines. And you saw how quickly that happened. If you think about how long some of our games take to load, you can imagine the amount of code that's behind that. Yeah, okay. Right, now we're going to rewind the tape, which will only take a few seconds. 3 seconds. And we're going to reset the Spectrum. Back into 128 BASIC. I'm going to type list just to prove to you the file is gone. Yeah, there's nothing there. All right. So, what command do we use?
So we use probably.
Do you remember how you get a game off of the cassette? What's the command?
Run?
No, load. Run is what you do if you've already got the program in the computer. In quotation marks, I can put Hello World, and I press enter, and then I'm going to press play. There we go.
Flash.
So that blue and cyan bit was the blank bit of tape at the beginning. Okay, great. And now it's loaded. We saw the blue and yellow come up again. Great. So we can see the program. I've pressed enter, that's why it's gone underneath there. But if I type in run, there we go.
Got it back.
Our file works. So that's what you could do. And when we play bigger games on this, we've actually got a game called The Bard's Tale on tape that we haven't played yet.
Very big.
Yeah, it takes a long time to load the game, but also once you've created a party of characters, on a blank tape you can save your party so that you can reload it later. And then when you get to a certain part in the game, it will say, now go back to your tape, fast forward to this position, and then load the next part of the game. So that's called a multi-load game, where you have to load several parts of the game in one go. But people a long time ago, if they were more technically minded, and let's say they had a small business like a shop, they could actually write a program that would enable them to run their accounting on a simple computer like this, save it onto tape or onto a disc, and then load it whenever they wanted to do their work. We would look at that today and say, oh no, that sounds too cumbersome, it would take too long. But you have to remember the alternative back then was that they were writing everything in manual book ledgers, so there were advantages to having programs on the computer, although to be honest it was really 10 years later before it really became practical to be using computers like that in small businesses. Okay, interesting?
Yeah.
Good, thank you for listening.
I've really enjoyed talking to Nick Pelling, really enjoyed playing Frak. It's been really fun, and since Frak's a really, really unusual idea for a game of caveman running around with a yo-yo attacking weird extra large giant Goombas, we have one challenge for you. Create a game concept as weird as you like that no one else has ever tried before, and put that down in the comments. And if someone knows of a game that matches someone else's comment, please tell us what the game is, because I'm expecting some of you to make some really weird game concepts. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, happy gaming.